It never ceases to amaze me when people say things like, this guitarist or that guitarist is the best or the greatest. Maybe you read in a magazine, 100 greatest guitarists of all time, and they've got them rated, and then you're looking through the list, and you're like, how could they say that? This whole idea of who's the best, this has got to be one of the stupidest conversations that has ever existed. In this video, I'll tell you why. What is music in the first place? Well, it's a language. It's something that communicates between people. It communicates energy, it communicates emotion, an attitude or philosophy, which really becomes identity. So the music that you most connect to is something then that speaks to something in you about who you are and what you value. So when a person says, this is the best guitarist or that's the best music, what they're really saying is, this is the guitarist or the music that I like the best, that I appreciate the most, that I connect with the best. And right there, if you just stop a second and think about it, it's obvious that when you say, this is the best, or, this music is the best, you're not even really talking about the music or the guitarist. You're really talking about yourself, exposing your own bias. What most of us are doing most of the time are going around trying to justify and bolster our own opinions. We want to hear ourselves keep repeating it as if somehow we say it enough, we're going to convince ourselves it's true. And then we want to hear lots of other people saying the same thing as if somehow, if a whole lot of people agree with us, that makes us more right. At this point, I'm talking about a lot more than just music. This is everything. We as human beings seem to have this problem. Instead of being honest about our opinion and owning our opinion and being okay with that, we want to pretend that it's somehow objective fact. Like our opinion by itself wouldn't be worth anything, so no one would bother to listen to it. And therefore, we want to pretend like, no, this is truth. This is some sort of objective truth. We don't use words like, in my opinion, or because of this, I think that. Forget all that crap. What we want to do is we want to say, it's obvious that, or the truth is, or these are the facts, or how could you say that? We want to attack the person who thinks differently than us. And what does all that bluster really mean? Well, it really says, I have a weak ego, it's insecure, so I'm seeking control because I don't feel like I have any control. So we move the point from ourselves onto this other thing. We don't want to look at ourselves, God forbid. So what we want to do is we want to pretend like we're talking about this other thing out here, and we act as if we have some authority to make these judgments, not only for ourselves, but of course for everyone else. Then we run into somebody else who's doing the same thing, and you see what the conflict is. So what does all this really mean to come back and apply it to music and who's the best guitar player? If you're engaging in that question, you're deluding yourself into thinking that you're actually talking about these other guitar players or the merits of these guitar players as if this is something outside of you, when in fact what you're really doing is you're talking about yourself. You're talking about what you value and what you find interesting. It's called projection. And most of us, most of the time, are not even dealing with reality. We're dealing with our projections of reality. If we could all get this point and really understand it clearly, the world would be a happier place. We'd all get along much better. Everything would run more smoothly. So what I have to say to each and every one of you is, knock it the f*** off. Some of you might say, we're just talking about music. We can squabble over music. It doesn't really cause any trouble. But I'll tell you this. There is conflict and there is encouragement. Conflict leads to greater conflict. Encouragement leads to greater unity. And you have a choice. You can go one way or the other. So if you go toward conflict, you're making the world a little darker, a little more oppositional, a little more turbulent, and a little bit more conflicted. Is that what you want? Well, if that's your goal in life, I guess I don't have much more to say to you. For the rest of us who would like the world to be a little better place, who would like the content of our lives to be happier and more harmonious, we might steer away from conflict and more toward encouragement and curiosity and interest and sharing ideas. What kind of a world would that be? maybe now you're understanding with even a higher degree of clarity how your opinion isn't objective fact, it isn't true for other people, but at the same time, it is true for you, and that's good enough. What do you do, though, when that a-hole comes across and starts barraging you and attacking your views? This goes back to one of the things I learned in the Al-Anon program years ago. Very, very useful. If somebody is shouting something at you, derogatory, the natural reaction is to get defensive or even aggressive and to engage in some sort of opposition and struggle to fight with them, right? Well, imagine, though, for a minute that that person that's doing the shouting is shouting out a window in the psychiatric ward. How defensive are you going to be now? If you recognize that they're in delusion, you don't really have to defend yourself. It's not necessary. But some techniques are harder than other techniques, so doesn't that mean some guitar players are better? Clearly, some technique is invested with a lot more control and finesse and ability than other technique. So you can objectively measure that. But the fact of the matter is that most people who are going to pass those kind of judgments aren't even qualified to make those determinations. Because in order to make that determination, what you really need to be able to do is do what that guitarist is doing and what this other guitarist is doing. And if you can do those things as well as those artists can do those things, then I think you've earned the right to speak about what it takes to be able to accomplish those things. Of course, 99.99% of guitarists have failed to do that, and the 0.001% of players who have put in the effort and are qualified to talk about technique probably realize that it's not personal in the first place, it's just a skill set, and technique, of course, is just a vehicle to be able to express yourself artistically, so just because you have good technique doesn't mean you're a good artist anyway. These people are not going to be investing in the drama of it. They realize it's all nonsense. But the negative condemning attitudes, the attitudes of the people who sit back and review other people's works as not good enough, well, those are generally the people who can't do it themselves. And by the way, let me also say that just because a person has honed their ability to express themselves artistically, they've got a good technique, doesn't mean that they can pass judgment on other players unless they can also do the techniques of those other players. What I'm really talking about here is awareness of our own blind spots. All human beings have blind spots because to be a human being is to have a limited perspective. We have our experience, we have what we've learned, we have our perceptions. And that means there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. If we know that we don't know everything, then we have some appreciation for our own blind spot. Then we're going to be a bit less apt to arrogantly run our mouth and tell other people how it is. We're going to be more apt to be curious, to listen. And that, of course, means we're going to be a bit more humble. It means that we're going to recognize that other people might have differences of opinion. They might know things that we don't know. They might be coming from a different point of view. And we stop being so judgmental. We start being able to respect other people's opinions and not have to have this battle. I don't have to prove you wrong in order for me to feel right, because I know what I know and it's okay and it works for me, and I can allow you to believe what you need to believe. Can you afford that same respect to me? Can you afford that same respect to other people? So when you see those kind of arguments happening, I suggest you don't take the bait. You recognize what's really going on and you just wish them well and move on. If we all started doing that a little bit more, the whole social media sphere would look a lot kinder and a lot better instead of the human dung heap that it's become.